Coming in at number 10 today is Lord Mar-Vell. Mar-Vell of the Kree was Marvel Comics' original Captain Marvel, and he was also the first Marvel superhero to permanently pass away when he succumbed to cancer in 1982's The Death of Captain Marvel. The character has reappeared as visions or in flashbacks and obviously in alternate realities, but the one we will focus on today is Mar-Vell of the Cancerverse. It's just a really cool and creative idea. Basically, on his infamous deathbed, the many angled ones contact and corrupt the dying Mar-Vell, granting him new powers which he used to transmute the other heroes, and with Marvel as their lord, they took down the Avatar of Death itself, which in turn completely destroyed Death, allowing the many angled ones to invade their reality.
Number 9. Ultron. Ultron was created by writer Roy Thomas and artist John Buscema, and made his first appearance in Avengers issue number 54 back in 1968. He's an advanced AI with a highly intelligent and malevolent personality, initially created by Dr. Henry Pym, the original Ant-Man. As a peacekeeping robot, Ultron eventually gained sentience and became obsessed with the idea of eliminating humanity, viewing it as the root cause of conflict and suffering in the entire world. He possesses superhuman strength, an incredibly high level of intelligence, durability, and the ability to upgrade and improve himself, making him a very scary villain by my view of things. As an artificial intelligence, Ultron has the ability to control and manipulate advanced technology, and often creates armies of robotic drones called Ultron Sentries to carry out his plans, with his primary goal being to replace humanity with an entire race of robotic beings he calls Ultronics. Now, unlike many villains who have, human motivations or emotions, Ultron's cold, calculating nature, devoid of human empathy or conscience, makes him particularly chilling. Once again, he views humans as inherently flawed and disposable. Outside of just the comics, the possibility of a real-life Ultron raises existential questions about the potential dangers of creating advanced AI and the consequences of unchecked technological progress, which is something that terrifies me on a regular basis. Overall, Ultron's combination of intelligence, ruthlessness, technological prowess, and his lack of human qualities contributes to his reputation as a genuinely scary and memorable villain in the Marvel Universe.
Number 8. The Void. Similar to Lord Mar-Vell, the Void is essentially taking the strongest and brightest character and creating a villain that is a sick and twisted version of that. A large part of what makes the Sentry so much more interesting is that while he is essentially like a god-like superhero who inspired all the other heroes, he also has a dark persona called the Void. The Void went on a rampage that took the lives of around 1 million people and almost destroyed Manhattan itself, and so the Sentry made the decision, with other heroes like Reed Richards and Doctor Strange, to cause the entire world to forget about the Sentry himself. Now, in New Avengers from 2004 and 2005, the Sentry comes back to the world, and through a series of events, the Void also returns. Full rosters of the Avengers, X-Men, and the Fantastic Four all went to take on the Void, and they couldn't do a damn thing. Only the Sentry himself could really subdue the Void, and it, in classic supervillain fashion, vowed to just come back. And it totally did. In this siege event, Norman Osborn decided to attack Asgard, and he used the Sentry to do this. The problem is, the Sentry ended up unleashing the Void, and it totally obliterated Asgard completely, taking out Loki in the process. This did actually branch off into a what-if story where the Void was never stopped and destroyed every superhero on Earth, and then went off into the universe to basically do the same thing everywhere else.
Number 7. Dracula. This might be my vampire-loving bias coming into play, but I think the way Dracula is portrayed in the Marvel Comics is quite scary, and that's coming from someone that's usually more enamored with him than scared by him. Hey, to each their own. So Dracula is a prominent character in the comics, and he's portrayed as, the classic vampire figure. So the classy vampire made his first appearance in Tomb of Dracula in 1972, which was created by writer Marv Wolfman and artist Gene Colan. This comic series, along with many other Marvel horror titles of the era, contributed to the resurgence of interest in horror comics. Now, he's based on the classic Bram Stoker depiction of the centuries-old vampire, cursed with immortality and supernatural powers. Like many traditional vampires, Dracula possesses superhuman strength, speed, agility, the ability to hypnotize and control the minds of his victims, transform into a bat or other creatures, and has an aversion to, the usual sunlight, garlic, crosses. He can also regenerate from most injuries, except for those inflicted by wooden stakes, through the heart, or exposure to sunlight. Dracula is often portrayed as the lord and ruler of Earth's vampires, commanding a vast army of followers and seeking to expand his dominion over both the human and vampire worlds. Now, Dracula has clashed with numerous Marvel superheroes over the years, and these confrontations often involve battles spells against his little minions as well. If that isn't scary enough for you, Dracula's curse of immortality is deeply unsettling, since, he can't be killed by any conventional means. As a vampire, Dracula feeds on the life source of the living, and his ability to hypnotize and control the minds of his victims adds quite the psychological dimension to the fear he instills. Hey, loss of free will and autonomy is a terrifying concept. One notable encounter occurred in the storyline Avengers 185 and 86, published in 1979, when Dracula targets the Avengers after becoming obsessed with the Scarlet Witch. And I can't say I blame him for falling in love with her. Granted, his attempt to make her his bride leads to quite the confrontation.
Number 6. Knull. Knull existed long before even the Celestials in the 6th incarnation of the multiverse, where he existed in basically nothingness. But when the Celestials created the 7th multiverse, Knull was mad that he got woken up. So he created the all-black Necro Sword and beheaded a Celestial. For this insane feat of power, he was banished to another void of nothingness, where he improved on the sword and eventually broke out into the universe, taking out various gods until he lost the Necro Sword after being defeated by a mysterious god of light. Knull then goes on to make more and more symbiotes. Yes, the symbiotes like Venom and Carnage, who all share a hive mind under the control of Knull himself. These symbiotes, who are all terrifying in their own right, eventually rebel and imprison Knull inside the symbiote homeworld, Clintar. In the 2020 King in Black story, Knull escapes, again, and heads to Earth, where he faces off against literally all the heroes and even some of the villains. He's one of the strongest villains in Marvel Comics. He is immortal, super strong, instantly heals, can create an unlimited amount of symbiotes, some of which who have been incredibly powerful on their own, and he can control them all. The Silver Surfer had to use all the reserves of the power cosmic to just temporarily stop Knull. Thor, using the power cosmic and the Thor Force, was no match for Knull at all. Knull has awoken, enslaved, and controlled Celestials and even defeated the Sentry, ripping him in half and absorbing the Void, who we just talked about. The only thing that defeated him was Eddie Brock's Venom wielding the Unipower, which is Captain Universe, the protector of the universe, and the opposite to literally everything that Knull represents.
Number 5, the Apocalypse Twins. So this duo made their first appearance in issue number 5 of Uncanny Avengers, which was only published in 2013, ergo making them the most recent villains to come into the universe that I'll be discussing today. So they're mutants and the twin descendants of the big supervillain Apocalypse, so yay! Being bad comes pretty honestly to them. Okay, technically their real names are Uriel and Iman, and they were initially created by writer Rick Remender and artist Olivier Coipel, but Apocalypse Twins does sound infinitely cooler. So they were raised by Clan Akaba, a cult dedicated to their dear dad, which aimed to bring about the return of the powerful mutant leader. In terms of specific scary powers, Uriel possesses the ability to manipulate and transmute organic matter, including the power to heal and create life, while Iman has time manipulation abilities, allowing her to see into the future and alter the time stream. The duo are skilled manipulators who use their powers and charisma to sway others to their cause, just like, your everyday narcissists. So that's another little tick on the pass list from me. The twins believed that they could save mutant kind by eliminating threats to mutants and humankind alike, and had a twisted vision of a better world and sought to achieve it through drastic means. I hate sounding like a broken record, but cheapers. Look, a perfect world does not exist when created by force. In terms of, the hell they've unleashed specifically on the Avengers, they created a team of the 4 Horsemen of Death to execute their plans and clashed with the Avengers and the X-Men, leading to a major conflict known as the Ragnarok Now storyline. The storylines involving the Apocalypse Twins had lasting repercussions in the Marvel Universe, affecting relationships among mutants and superheroes. Their parentage plays obviously a very significant role in their menacing presence. As the offspring of Apocalypse, one of the most powerful and iconic villains in Marvel history, their genetic lineage implies an inherent potential for immense power and malevolence.
Number 4. Chthon. Chthon stands as one of the most powerful demons in existence in Marvel Comics, and his ancient origins make him comparable to the very archetype of evil itself. He predates even the likes of Mephisto and is often regarded as the closest embodiment of the devil and demonology in Marvel Comics. Chthon and his Ngarai once ruled over Earth until they faced an assault by the angel Lucifer, an event that occurred long before Lucifer's rebellion against heaven and his ascent to rule over hell as the devil. Chthon's influence extends extends to the very roots of dark supernatural entities, including witches, werewolves, and vampires. He holds dominion over the most potent form of magic, known as chaos magic, the same mystical force harnessed by the Scarlet Witch herself. To put this into perspective, Scarlet Witch has reshaped the whole of reality with just a fraction of Chthon's power. His counterpart, Oster, is one of the essential components of the Vishanti, which is a triumvirate that actively opposes Chthon and supplies Doctor Strange with his power. In response to Chthon's malevolent dark hold, they created the Book of Vishanti, a beacon of light against the Book of Darkness. Even powerful beings such as Dormammu and Mephisto invoke Chthon's name when casting their most formidable spells. Chthon's presence alone nearly corrupted and permanently incapacitated the Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange. Defeating him is an arduous task, and even when achieved, it often results in his banishment back to his personal dimension, the other realm, where he's basically untouchable.
Number 3, Korvac. So Michael Korvac, commonly known as Korvac, first appeared in issue number 3 of Giant-Sized Defenders back in 1975. Created by writer Steve Gerber and artist Jim Starlin, Korvac is quite the complex character with a unique and powerful storyline. He started as an ordinary human computer technician, but underwent a transformation after encountering the Badoon, an alien race. This transformation granted him incredible powers, including, energy manipulation, telekinesis, and matter transmutation, making him pretty near godlike in terms of abilities. Yikes! Korvac possesses nearly limitless powers, including, once again, the ability to manipulate reality itself. He's also not only physically powerful, but incredibly intelligent. Driven by a desire for order and perfection, he embarked on a quest to reshape the universe according to his own vision. While his motives weren't purely evil, the way he pursued them brought him into conflict with the Avengers, ergo how he earned a spot on our list today. One of his most notable storylines, which was the Korvac saga, is a pivotal moment in Marvel Comics history, since it challenged the Avengers on multiple levels, both morally and physically, and had pretty far-reaching consequences. Once again, Korvac's godlike powers, intelligence, and the existential threats he posed to the entire universe made him a pretty memorable villain. His character is a great example of how complexity and moral ambiguity can add depth to a supervillain, making him more than just, a one-dimensional antagonist.
Number 2, Carnage. The red symbiotes always seem to be the worst of the worst, and the one that would be born from Venom himself seems to be the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst. When Eddie Brock was briefly detached from the Venom symbiote, he was imprisoned, and his cellmate was none other than Cletus Cassidy, a psychotic killer serving 11 consecutive life sentences in Rikers Island. When Venom showed up and bust Eddie out of prison, it produced its first offspring as a result of Thanos seeking the Infinity Gems out in space. I don't know how those two connect, but that's just what happened. This offspring would be Carnage, and it was left in the cell when Venom and Eddie escaped, bonding with Cletus Cassidy through a wound in his hand. Meaning, the bond they formed was on a blood level, and it would be nearly impossible to break that. Despite that, there have been other characters that have taken on the symbiote. Norman Osborn was a notable one when he became the Red Goblin and was absolutely terrifying. And then I would be silly to not mention that the Grendel Dragon symbiote had part of itself merge with Carnage to create an incredibly terrifying version of the symbiote known as Dark Carnage that absolutely put up a hell of a fight against Venom and others. Now, Carnage is back yet again, and he is reaching a level of power that puts him on the cosmic map as he is constantly upgrading himself with all kinds of tech and magic to be able to face Eddie Brock, who has become the King in Black of the symbiote race.
Number 1, Thanos. Created by writer and artist Jim Starlin, Thanos made his first appearance in Iron Man issue number 55 back in 1973. He's known for his distinctive appearance and is a towering purple-skinned alien with a heavily muscled physique and deep-set glowing eyes. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanos is obsessed with the concept of death and seeks to impress Mistress Death, a personification of death in the Marvel Universe, and visually speaking, I can't blame him for wanting to impress her. To gain her favor, he often engages in grandiose and destructive acts, including seeking to wipe out half of all life in the universe. Thanos possesses a vast array of superhuman abilities, including super strength, durability, and agility, not to mention that he's highly intelligent and a strategic mastermind. Despite being a villain, he exhibits moral complexity and genuinely believes that his actions are necessary for the greater good, even if they involve mass destruction. The level of delusion there might just be what scares me the most. Oh, and tiny thing, Thanos also poses a cosmic level threat to the entire universe, since his plans often involve consequences on a cosmic scale, making him a particularly dangerous foe. Nope.
Number 10, Dormammu. One of the most powerful magical villains in the Marvel Universe is definitely Dormammu, especially if you end up going to the Dark Dimension to face him. Here, Dormammu reigns supreme, and so his power is considered limitless. I don't know about you, but if Dormammu is ruling, I'm pretty much just going to stay out of the Dark Dimension, I think. I think that's good idea if he's there. At one point, Doctor Strange even ended up as Dormammu's prisoner in the comics, trapped in the Dark Dimension alongside his defenders, and for a surprisingly lengthy period of time too. In fact, Strange almost gave up hope that he'd actually even get out at one point. Dormammu himself is composed of mystical energy. He's basically like a big ball of flaming magic. He's virtually immortal, while in his dimension can manipulate matter as he sees fit, can control the elements, and can change shape and size at will. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to let us know that you love us by clicking that like button. Number 9. Dracula. When we think of scary villains in general, many of us probably normally think of scary monsters that we've seen in movies and read about in iconic literature, like Dracula. Well, Dracula, thanks to Dracula being considered public domain, he also exists in most comic book realities as well, including that of Marvel Comics. And guess what? Doctor Strange has also fought against him. In fact, if it weren't for Doctor Strange, Dracula may have never been defeated. Doctor Strange not only defeated Dracula, but at the same time also successfully defeated all vampires on Earth. It's true. How did he do this? By possessing the knowledge of and utilizing the Montesi formula. This isn't Strange's only tie to the world of vampires either. Doctor Strange also has a brother who became a vampire, and he has crossed paths with Chthon, who is believed to have been the one to create a few different kinds of supernatural beings, including, you guessed it, vampires. Number 8. Cyttorak. Doctor Strange actually wields the bands of Cyttorak, tying him directly to this villain. But you probably know Cyttorak better for his influence over Juggernaut, the X-Men villain who is the stepbrother of Professor Charles Xavier, aka Professor X. Cain Marko, Charles' stepbrother, was the avatar of Cyttorak for a long time, having come into contact with Cyttorak's gem and gaining immense power, also being made to act as Cyttorak's agent on Earth. Cyttorak himself is a demon and has also been worshipped as a god. He is focused on and symbolizes heavily the concept of destruction, known as the Lord of Oblivion and the Destroyer. He was at his most powerful when he was on Earth, but eventually became banished from Earth and was forced to return to his home dimension known as the Crimson Cosmos. He actually made his first full appearance in Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme issue number 44. I wonder actually, remember how we used to say that Cyclops' eyes are like a portal to a world filled with energy? That was a thing people used to say. I wonder if that was the same world that Cyttorak was from, just because like Crimson Cosmos makes me think of a world that's just pure like red energy. I don't know if that's what it's like in Cyttorak's dimension, but that's a headcanon that's in my mind now, so. Number 7. Three Mothers. Death of Doctor Strange is an overarching story and miniseries that really has it all. It has drama, mystery, romance, heartbreak, and of course, lots of horrifying moments to just round it all out. The story delivers on what the title promises, the death of Doctor Strange. After his death, it is revealed Strange had some fail-safes in place to help him actually solve his own murder. A past version of Strange appears and ends up hot on the trail of solving his own murder with the help of magical allies such as Wong and Clea. We're also introduced to the Three Mothers, villains who live to feed another possibly even more terrifying entity who's actually their own master, known as the Peregrine Child. Number 6. Chthon. Doctor Strange is one of the few who is strong enough to actually fight against Chthon. For those who are not familiar, Chthon is often attached to Scarlet Witch in Marvel Comics and is a demonic elder god, one of the oldest entities in the Marvel Universe. He is the one who is often believed to have granted Scarlet Witch her chaos magic abilities and has been known from time to time to possess Wanda as such, using her as his host. Doctor Strange is an immensely powerful magic user and is actually one of the few who can resist Chthon's influence and avoid becoming Chthon's mindless puppet. Strange has fought against Chthon many times, including when Scarlet Witch was possessed by Chthon during Secret Empire, with Strange being the one to actually free Wanda from Chthon's influence. Number 5. Nightmare. Nightmare is one of Doctor Strange's first ever villains. In fact, the first ever Doctor Strange villain in terms of comic book appearances. Nightmare made his first appearance alongside Doctor Strange, who also made his debut appearance in issue 110 of Strange Tales, released back in April of 1963. What makes Nightmare a villain to be feared? He plagues his victims using nightmares, reveling and finding power in their fear. Nightmare has been known in the comics for palling around in the past with the equally, if not more terrifying, baddie, Shumagarath. Nightmare is also in essence immortal. As long as people dream, he will continue to exist. He is the ruler of the Nightmare Dimension, one of the splinter realms of the Dream Dimension, and is actually considered to be the most powerful of the Splinter Realms rulers. Number 4. Shumagarath. Shumagarath is one of the Great Old Ones, and Many-Angled Ones, basically a Marvel version of an Elder God. Like Dormammu, he is also known to be one of the Lords of Chaos, although it's been kinda unclear throughout the comic lore as to whether there truly are multiple of those, or just one Lord of Chaos, who kinda like continues to be renamed throughout history. The Many-Angled Ones are known for being one of the oldest kinds of entities in the Marvel Universe. Shumagarath has returned to Earth many times and set up as a god there, being worshipped even on Earth before the sinking of Atlantis, where he demanded blood sacrifices. That's how you know he's evil and he's scary. Number 3. Umar. Umar is the sister of Dormammu. She is known as a powerful sorceress and villain who sometimes works alongside her brother when she's not busy devising her own devious plots, which sometimes involve basically getting back at her brother for something. While many people think of Dormammu as being the more terrifying of the two of these beings, Umar was actually also very active in helping to conquer the Dark Dimension. In fact, she may have even ended up the ruler of the Dark Dimension in Dormammu's place if she hadn't been exhausted due to dealing with the Mindless Ones. Umar is just as terrifying, if not at times I would say more so, than her brother. Number 2. Death. Death has to be one of the most frightening villains that Doctor Strange has fought against. Although sometimes Death isn't really a villain and is more like a neutral being. But I do also mean literally fought against, if you're wondering. I don't just mean like, oh, when Doctor Strange had to face Death. No, I mean literally fought. When most people think Death in regards to the Marvel Universe, they think of Mistress Death, the pretty woman that embodies the concept whom Thanos is in love with, and whom in the comics he destroyed half of all life in the cosmos in an attempt to impress. However, Death can take many different forms, and in Doctor Strange, Sorcerer Supreme issue number 55, Death is a creepy looking skeleton instead, who comes to claim Strange, threatening to take Strange back to its realm after claiming Strange's life. Here, Death torments Strange, trying to like sort of basically get him to lose his willpower here and cave in, give up, as the issue's main antagonist by making him relive the loss of his family, with him re-experiencing the loss of his sister, his brother, and his parents. Yeah, if you didn't know, Strange has siblings, he's lost them, and he's lost a lot of people. Like, Strange actually has a really tragic life. We should do a like top 10 worst things that have happened to Doctor Strange if we haven't already. Number 1. Mephisto. Mephisto is often thought of as the devil of Marvel. He rules over his own hellish dimension and is known for making lots of contracts with heroes that usually result in them being very unhappy in the end, despite getting what they wanted, much like the devil in various tales and lore. He's not someone you wanna make a bargain with, as typically there are conditions, which means that Mephisto often comes out on top in the end, even though, you know, he gave you what you wanted. Mephisto is both demonic and magical in terms of his origin and classification in Marvel's various realms of categories for characters. And if he plays his cards right, he can even use his powers to warp the reality of the universe, which we've actually seen him successfully do a few different times. Unlike most other characters in Marvel Comics, Mephisto is one of the rare few who have actually had success with making his changes to reality permanent. Mephisto is also a formidable foe in one-on-one combat, being that he is also super strong, durable, fast, and virtually immortal. Trust me, you wouldn't want to dance with this devil in the pale moonlight.
Number 10. Bi-Beast. Created by an extinct race of aliens called the Bird People, Bi-Beast is an android with two heads stacked on top of each other. In one head is the knowledge of warfare and tactics, while the other is filled with information on culture. I mean, it's a little weird that the Bird People didn't just put all of this information into one slightly larger head, but hey, I'm just some guy on YouTube. What do I know about alien android design? First appearing in Incredible Hulk number 169, Bi-Beast was left alone in the floating city of Aerie after the extinction of his alien masters. When the city's machines stopped working due to deterioration, Bi-Beast captured Bruce Banner to try and force him to repair them. Banner tricked Bi-Beast and instead used the alien technology to cure Harpy and return her to her true form of Betty Ross. This resulted in a fight between Bi-Beast and the Hulk, but this fight was abandoned when Bi-Beast realized that MODOK was attacking the city. Rather than let the floating city be captured, Bi-Beast activated the city's self-destruct protocols, seemingly dying in the process. Now, Bi-Beast has reappeared a few times in the years since, trying to destroy the world and kill the Hulk, but honestly, other than his strange appearance, there's not much scary about him. But hey, someone's gotta be at the bottom of the list. Number 9. Cyclop. Cyclops is a one-eyed member of an ancient insectoid race who worship the dark gods. Cyclops was chosen to be an agent of these dark gods who gave him the task of finding them a power source that could summon them. If he succeeded, the gods promised to reawaken his race so that they could conquer Earth for themselves. He chose the Hulk as his power source and captured him in Avengers number 88, hoping to shrink him down to a more manageable size. When the Avengers interrupted this process to fight the villain, the Hulk was left alone and no one was able to turn off the machine, and the Jade Giant was accidentally shrunk so small that he vanished from sight. Cyclops found the Hulk in the microverse and the two battled, but Hulk came out victorious. Yet another villain who is more scary looking than anything else. I do like the idea of a bug cultist trying to bring back dark gods in order to take over the world though. He has only had 11 appearances, so maybe he can earn a higher spot on the list at some point in the future. Number 8. Lord Armageddon, the warlord of an alien race called the Trojan. Armageddon led his armies to numerous victories against several worlds in his efforts to expand his empire. He was so consumed with this expansion that he didn't notice when his wife died giving birth to his twin sons. When one of his twins was murdered by Atalanta, the surviving son fell in love with her and decided to try and marry her, and kidnapped her, bringing her back to his homeworld. Lord Armageddon supported this, and when Hulk and the Silver Surfer came to try and rescue Atalanta, Armageddon managed to incapacitate both the heroes. When his son Trauma fell on a broken piece of armor and died, he asked his father to give the heroes and his beloved safe passage home. Armageddon later tried to bring his son back to life, but the machine he was using was destroyed by Hulk. Although this earned the Hulk Armageddon's respect, it also caused him to vow revenge on the Hulk. I think anyone who is so obsessed with interstellar domination and who can fight the Hulk and the Silver Surfer is pretty scary, but mostly just because of how much raw power they are dealing with. So if this were a video ranking the powers of the villains, perhaps he would be higher on this list. Number 7. Harpy. After longtime Hulk love interest Betty Ross's husband was seemingly killed in a rescue mission gone wrong, she suffered a nervous breakdown. MODOK learned of this and pumped her full of gamma radiation, hoping to create a creature that could go toe-to-toe with the Hulk. The gamma rays gave Betty wings, talons, and the ability to shoot dangerous rays from her hands, and she became the insane creature known as Harpy. As stated before, Bruce Banner was able to use Beast's tech to save her, and Betty would go on to marry Bruce, die, and then come back to life as the Red She-Hulk, before further mutating into the Red Harpy, who is more of an ally to the Hulk than an enemy. Harpy has a scary look, no doubt, but what I find scary about her is more so the idea of the person Hulk loves more than anything becoming a monster that wants him dead. Having to then fight her and deal with the fact that even if he wins the fight, he's just hurt Betty. It adds a certain level of dread and nuance that you don't get with a lot of the other villains. Number 6. Absorbing Man. After the death of his mother, Carl Creel's father became abusive towards him, eventually kicking him out to live on the street when he eventually tried to fight back. In order to survive, Creel engaged in petty theft to support himself while building his career as a boxer. Creel eventually became an enforcer for the Owl before getting arrested. While serving his sentence, he was chosen by Loki to be a pawn in one of his schemes against Thor. Loki spiked the inmate's water with Asgardian herbs that granted him the power to absorb the properties of any element he touched. He used his powers to absorb the powers and properties of Mjolnir, Thor's magical hammer, and was able to successfully take on the God of Thunder, although he was eventually defeated in a rematch. Absorbing Man went on to battle many heroes, including the Hulk, who he was hired to kill by an evil organization called They Who Wield Power. Although this didn't work, he did tangle with the Hulk a few other times, such as when they fought on Easter Island, and Absorbing Man absorbed the island in hopes of taking over the world. I didn't include Absorbing Man in the first video because he has fought so many Marvel heroes that it's hard to call him a Hulk villain. However, he is a major player in the Immortal Hulk series, so let's go with it. In this series, he was given an injection of Hulk Plug, which turned him red and let him absorb gamma radiation. He fought the Hulk and inadvertently absorbed the demonic being known as the One Below All. This gave Creel a very painful looking and significantly more terrifying appearance, and caused him, Hulk, and all the members of Gamma Flight Hulk to be transported to the Demon's Realm. Creel helped stop the One Below All and was offered a spot on Gamma Flight by Puck, where he currently works as a hero rather than a villain. Number 5. Glob. When a prisoner named Joe Timms learned that the love of his life was dying, Joe decided to escape prison in order to see her one last time. Unfortunately for him, he drowned in the swamp near the prison before he could make it back to her. Years later, the Hulk was disposing of a barrel of radioactive waste, and in a move that I'm sure the EPA would be horrified by, threw it into the swamp. The waste revived Timms and transformed his body into the deformed, gloopy mess you see before you. Because she seemingly just can't catch a break, Betty Ross was mistaken by the Glob for his lost love. This caused Glob to kidnap her and for the Hulk to go after him. As a creature of goop, the Hulk was unable to damage him with his fists, and if he hadn't been destroyed by the same radioactive waters that spawned him, Hulk may have been out of luck. Glob was later reformed by the Leader and has tangled with the Hulk a few times in the years since. Speaking of which, number 4, the Leader. Samuel Stearns was a man of below average intelligence who was working at a chemical plant when one of the canisters of waste he was moving broke open and doused him in the toxic waste. On the plus side, rather than giving him cancer, it gave him super intelligence. On the flip side, it also caused his head to grow to a massive size and for his skin to turn green. Stearns decided to dedicate himself to taking over the world and started calling himself the Leader. Now, there is no doubt that the Leader is one of Hulk's greatest foes, if not the greatest of them. I mean, it's either him or Abomination. A lot of you were shocked at him being left off of part 1 of this list, and honestly, my reasoning was that the Leader isn't especially scary compared to the other villains he recruits for his schemes against the Hulk. However, considering the amount of horrifying plots he is responsible for, combined with how disturbing the character was in his run in Immortal Hulk when he grew to giant size and attacked the Hulk with tendrils, I'm happy to include him here. While we're on the subject, I'm currently working on a video about the Immortal Hulk for our Attempting to Explain series, so keep an eye out for that in the coming weeks. Number 3, Madman. Coming in at the number 3 slot, we actually have the Leader's brother, Philip Stearns. Phil was a student at Caltech at the same time as Bruce Banner. Although brilliant in his own right, he was jealous of Bruce's superior intellect and developed an obsession with his classmate. When Bruce became the Hulk, this infatuation became dangerous, as Phil started experimenting on himself with gamma radiation in order to try and be more like his favorite hero. Not only did this result in Stearns becoming a super strong, deformed monster, but it caused what was left of his sanity to snap, and him to develop multiple personality disorder. Although he initially tried to kill the Hulk, he later changed his mind, deciding to remain a villain, but to not kill Hulk, as life would be too boring without him to annoy. Now, the idea of a Hulk who has developed DID and is obsessed with Bruce Banner and the Hulk is pretty disturbing, and is frightening enough that the Leader actually once teamed up with the Hulk to defeat him, confessing to Hulk that he is scared of Madman. Although years later, Leader would eventually kill his brother in Thunderbolts Volume 2, Issue 6. Number 2, Xemnu. This fluffy beast is an alien with the power to hypnotize people on a mass scale who crash landed on Earth. He planned on using his hypnotic powers to make the people of Earth build him a new ship in order to return to his home planet, despite the fact that the force of the rocket would tear the Earth apart. Although this plan failed, Xemnu did eventually make his way back to his home planet, where he discovered that everyone had died of disease. He returned to Earth, where he was engaged in many schemes to use his hypnotism to take over the planet. He has fought a lot of heroes such as Namor, Iron Man, and Deadpool, but he seems to hate the Hulk the most. In one of his more creative schemes, he tricked the Hulk into defeating a monster, causing a wave of parasites to be unleashed on nearby civilians. Xemnu then showed up and stopped the parasites and implanted false memories in all the witnesses' minds of him being a hero. He continued to use these powers to turn public opinion against the Hulk before Hulk eventually defeated him. When killed, Xemnu can reform his body by taking over someone else's body and gradually transforming it into his. As if that wasn't bad enough, he has developed a taste for humans and regularly consumes them in brutal and terrifying ways. Number 1, the One Below All. So the One Above All is the ruler of the multiverse and the creator of all life in it. Although he is the source of love and good, he also has an evil form known as the One Below All, who is the personification of hatred and destruction. The ruler of the lowest point of reality, the below place, it is able to manifest itself on Earth through the mutagenic form of gamma radiation. This means that when Bruce Banner was caught in the gamma bomb, he was infused with this dark entity's power. The One Below All wants to become the only remaining thing in the multiverse and destroy everything else. As he is incapable of having his own personality without a host, it waited until Hulk's father, Brian Banner, died to merge with him and take on his personality, which, if you know the character or watched part 1 of this video, you know is a really bad thing. The leader eventually managed to absorb Brian's soul in hopes of learning more about the One Below All, but was possessed by the One Below All. It's hard to say which actions to count as the One Below Alls and which to count as Brian Banner or the leaders, but his influence is undeniably horrible and worthy of the top spot on this list. Number 10, Speed Freak. Speed Freak is a criminal and an addict who killed an inventor and stole his battle suit in order to become a superpowered addict criminal. His intimidating battle suit helps him to fly as well as create holographic images and features adamantium cutting blades as well as projectile barbs, which have helped him to go toe-to-toe with the Hulk, even managing to slice open the Hulk's stomach at one point. What makes Speed Freak scary is his lack of humanity, working as a killer for hire in order to feed his addiction. He also shows no care for potential collateral damage, once attacking an AIDS benefit concert in order to try and take out one of his targets. Speed Freak was one of the villains killed in the Stamford incident, a fight between a group of villains and the New Warriors, which resulted in huge amounts of collateral damage and directly led to the Superhero Registration Act and the resulting Civil War. Certainly not the scariest villain on this list, but one I wouldn't want to run into in a dark alley nonetheless. Number 9, the Dogs of War. Developed by the United States military for hunting down the Jade Giant, the Dogs of War were 4 ordinary dogs that were fed gamma-infused meat that transformed them into gamma mutates. They were used to track the Hulk's scent and were trained to attack him when they found him, but being rage-fueled Hulk dogs, they attacked both the Hulk and their military handlers. Now, being attacked by a dog is a horrifying experience under the best of circumstances, but dealing with giant canines with super strength and anger issues is even worse. These paralyzing pooches had only one appearance in Incredible Hulk Volume 2, Issue 14, but they made an impact, being adapted on screen in the criminally underrated Hulk film a couple years later. Number 8, Zax. The first of a few energy drainers on this list, Zax was formed when a group of villains tried to plant a bomb at a nuclear energy plant. Rather than causing an explosion, this caused the energy in the plant's pylon to gain sentience, incinerating the villains and absorbing their intelligence. Zax then went on a rampage, destroying everything and everyone in its path in order to gain as much intelligence as possible. In his first appearance, Zax destroyed several city blocks in the course of a few minutes, killing untold numbers of people and growing 40 feet tall before being confronted by the Hulk. As if that wasn't scary enough, it has also been revealed that incinerating people and stealing their psionic energy is a physically pleasurable experience for the monster. So Zax isn't just killing to gain strength and power, he's also doing it because it feels good. Number 7, Piecemeal. Piecemeal was once a normal man until he was captured and killed by the Red Skull, who wanted to use his body for an evil experiment. The Red Skull's scientists replaced several of his limbs and extremities, turning him into a terrifying beast. Piecemeal eventually escaped from the Red Skull's island and made his way to the mainland with no memories of his previous life. Piecemeal is obviously a pretty scary looking dude, and his superhuman strength and ability to shoot energy blasts make him a formidable foe, but these are not the things that make him terrifying. As he has no memories of his life, Piecemeal wants to experience as much of the spectrum of human emotion as possible. He does this by triggering the emotions of people and then touching them to absorb their emotions and memories, not stopping until the victim is a worn-out husk. One of the ways he triggers people's emotions is by transforming his face to look like them, putting them into a state of shock. He wanted to absorb the Hulk's rage, but was instead impaled and thrown into Loch Ness. This was thought to be the end of the villainous monster, but when the Hulk searched the loch, he could find no body. Was Piecemeal eaten by the Loch Ness monster? Or is he still wandering the earth, draining victims? Number 6, the Quintronic Man. The Quintronic Man is an exosuit that was developed to be piloted by 5 men trained to act as one. Although originally developed for space exploration, it was instead used to battle the Hulk in Incredible Hulk number 213, even managing to beat the Hulk in that issue. While this isn't particularly scary, what puts the Quintronic Man on this list is its later appearance in Indestructible Hulk number 3. In this story, AIM is attempting to reactivate the Quintronic Man for their own nefarious purposes. In order to accomplish this, they reassemble the original 5 pilots. The only issue? 4 of them are dead. Thankfully for AIM, they are able to use electrochemical technology to ensure that the Quintronic Man still has psionic access to the dead pilot's skills and reflexes and can thus use the dead body's muscle memories to control the robot. In layman's terms, this means that the Hulk is being attacked by a robot full of corpses, which is equal parts scary and disturbing. The Quintronic Man puts up quite a struggle against the Hulk, but it meets its end when Hulk pushes it into a volcano. Number 5. Red Hulk. After the death of his daughter at the hands of the Abomination, longtime Hulk enemy Thunderbolt Ross fell into a deep depression that was only worsened by a perceived lack of purpose after the Hulk was shipped off-world in the Planet Hulk storyline. He was approached by MODOK and the Leader, who convinced him to join their evil super team, the Intelligentsia. During the events of World War Hulk, they managed to siphon energy off of the Hulk and transfer it into Ross, transforming him into the Red Hulk. Red Hulk has all of Ross's smarts as well as his legendary temper, but lacks Hulk's compassion, making him a dangerous and terrifying enemy. With the help of a life model decoy, Ross was able to hide his Red Hulk identity for some time, continuing to work for the government while still going on missions for the Intelligentsia. Number 4. Abomination. Emil Blonsky was a communist spy who was working undercover at the same military base as Bruce Banner, working to sabotage the Gamma experiments so that US forces would not become more advanced than the communists. When a distraught Bruce Banner tried to take his own life with a Gamma machine in his lab, Blonsky was there spying on the professor. When Bruce's self-harm attempt was interrupted and he was taken away, Blonsky was hit by the Gamma radiation instead. Like Banner, Blonsky had a strange genetic variation that caused the Gamma rays to transform him into the Abomination. Abomination is able to retain his human intelligence and is actually stronger than the Hulk unless the Hulk reaches a state of total enragement. Unlike Banner, Abomination is thrilled with his new form and regularly goes on rampages, killing entire towns. He considers Hulk his equal, as both are disfigured and alone, but when he learned that Bruce had married his longtime sweetheart Betty Ross, he was enraged at the idea that the Hulk was happier than him. In a move of sociopathic pettiness, when Betty was hospitalized, Blonsky injected his blood into her dialysis machine, killing her with Gamma poisoning. Number 3. Half-Life. In an origin not dissimilar to the Hulk's, Tony Masterson was an ordinary college professor until he was exposed to a Gamma bomb. This turned Masterson into essentially a living corpse who only comes alive at night. He uses his vampiric powers to drain his victim's life force with his touch. When he touches a Gamma-powered character, such as the Hulk, he drains their powers rather than their life force. In his first appearance in Incredible Hulk number 334, he tried to drain the Hulk's powers, hoping that they would give him enough life force to be able to stay alive during the day, but Hulk managed to defeat him, ripping his arms off. To the Hulk's shock, Half-Life was still able to use his arms despite them not being attached. He was later given a titanium battle suit by the Leader and very nearly destroyed the Jade Giant, but because he overused his powers in doing so, he ended up in a mummified coma. Number 2. The Wendigo. The Wendigo is a figure from indigenous folklore that was first adapted to Marvel Comics in Incredible Hulk number 162. The curse of the Wendigo is something that happens when a person engages in cannibalism in the Canadian wilderness. The curse causes the person to transform into a vicious creature who has an insatiable hunger for human flesh. In its first comics appearance, the Wendigo is a man named Paul Cartier, who goes on a hunting trip with his friends Georges Baptiste and Henri Clouzot. When they are attacked by wolves, the trio are forced to hide in a cave where Henri dies. After 4 days trapped in the cave with no supplies, Georges wakes up and finds Paul eating his friend's remains, inadvertently giving himself the Wendigo curse. Over the years, Wendigo and Hulk clashed several times before Paul's friend Georges managed to transfer the curse to himself, freeing his friend and becoming the second Wendigo. This Wendigo was eventually defeated by Alpha Flight with the help of Wolverine and Nightcrawler. In the years since, several different Wendigos have cropped up in Marvel's Canadian wilderness, each more dangerous than the last. Number 1. Brian Banner. Bruce Banner's father, Brian, is scary because he is all too real. After being abused by his own father, Brian vowed to never have children. Although an accomplished scientist, Brian struggled with alcoholism and anger issues, and when his wife became pregnant and gave birth to Bruce, he became abusive to both of them. This culminated one Christmas when his wife tried to take Bruce and leave, and Brian killed her. Brian was put in a mental institute as a result until he was released 15 years later. During a confrontation between Bruce and Brian at his mother's grave, the two got into a fight, and Bruce accidentally killed his father. Bruce repressed this memory and spent the next several years believing that his father had been killed in a robbery. As if that weren't bad enough, Bruce was haunted by the ghost of his abusive father until he confronted his father in hell during a period of death in Incredible Hulk 460. Brian is the source of most of Bruce's fears, which proved to be most unfortunate when he was resurrected in the Chaos War as a hybrid of the Devil Hulk and the Guilt Hulk, a dangerous and powerful being who fed off of his son's fear. When that failed and Brian died again, he gained the ability to possess gamma mutates using his influence to control several characters, including Jailbait, Sasquatch, the Absorbing Man, and even the Hulk himself. Even before gaining hellish powers, Brian Banner was the villain that both Bruce Banner and the Hulk were most afraid of. The fact that he now has the ability to control some of Hulk's allies and turn them against him makes him all the more frightening.
Number 10. The Maker. The Maker is one of the creepiest villains out there, but at the same time, he also seems like one of the saddest as well, at least at the beginning of Ultimate Invasion. And honestly, there are undertones of that throughout, I would say, the Ultimate continuity for him. Who is the Maker? He's the version of Reed Richards who we normally know as Mr. Fantastic, who hails from the reality of Earth 1610, known as the Ultimate or Ultimates reality. What makes him so scary? Perhaps the realization that Reed potentially makes an even more formidable villain than he does a hero. He's like Reed without the moral code. I mean, he is Reed without the moral code. That's literally who he is. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us you love us by clicking that subscribe. And make sure you have that bell on so you don't miss out on any of our good old nerdy notifications. Number 9. Reavers. Over the years, the Reavers have become scarier and scarier as a group of villains. Initially, the Reavers were members of the Hellfire Club, in a way belonging to the Hellfire Club's elite team of bodyguards, their own personal militia known as the Hellfire Knight. After being taken by Mojo and repurposed, they were turned into cyborgs, who have become more and more horrific as the years have progressed in terms of their appearance. The Reavers would go on to become affiliated with Spiral, Lady Deathstrike, and of course, Donald Pierce. Initially, they just look like eccentric 80s and 90s villains, but in the modern age, they look more like mad science experiments gone wrong, with the weapons that they wield becoming integrated with their own bodies, a part of that. Before, they were some of my favorite comedic relief in terms of comic book villains, and now they're more like nightmare fuel. Number 8. Mistress Death. What is one of the greatest fears that most people have? Death, of course. The end of life and the journey into the unknown. I think we're the most afraid of death because we just don't really know what comes next. It is the end of something, which honestly already tends to scare us humans, just the idea of something ending, but it also represents a massive change for us, moving from the realm of the living to the non-living, and whatever comes after that, if anything does at all. Hence, Mistress Death has to be one of the most terrifying villains we have at Marvel Comics. Now, granted, Mistress Death isn't really a straight up villain. She's less of a villain and more of like a concept. Everything must die, and we've also seen what the world would be like without her doing her job. See Marvel's Cancerverse. Yeah, not so pretty. But at the same time, the idea of death still scares us, and although she isn't really taking life maliciously, it's easey to see her as a villain when she preys on the fears of so many in the Marvel multiverse, and the fears of us as readers in the real world too. Number 7. Malice. When it comes to Malice, I think the reason why she scares me so much is my fear of possession. I just think of Malice taking over people's bodies, making heroes perform as they normally would not, and I'm honestly terrified of that. Malice has been a few different people in the comics, and I'm not sure if we've ever really clarified if they were the same entity or not as some of the other Malices that we've had. There is Malice as in Alice McAllister, who can exist as a purely psionic being and has done so in the past, possessing various X-Men members such as Lorna Dane, Psylocke, and even Storm for a time. And there is Malice as in the darker persona of Susan Storm, the Invisible Woman, which takes control of the Invisible Woman and who apparently was made manifest during the Psycho Man's attack on New York. Pretty sure these are two separate entities, but I think it's also really interesting that they both kind of like possess people, and they're also both named Malice, so I just decided to include them together because you never know. You never know. Those could be connected at some point. Number 6, Dormammu. When it comes to ghoulies that exist less in the physical world and more in other dimensions, Dormammu is one of the folks who really reigns supreme. Why is Dormammu one of the most horrifying villains Marvel has to offer? Probably because he's just so darn powerful. Also, we don't call him the Dread Dormammu, the Dread Lord Dormammu, for nothing. He rules the Dark Dimension, which he conquered, and he isn't afraid to mess you up in honestly really terrible ways. I feel like being killed by Dormammu or his forces would actually be a mercy, considering all the terrible ways I've seen him torment his foes, both in the comics and honestly, outside of them as well. Number 5, Cassandra Nova. Cassandra Nova just creeps me out, even just to look at her. Often the way she is drawn is what disturbs me the most, but at the same time, she is drawn in a way that makes sense when you consider just how terrifying she is from a power set standpoint and in regards to how twisted her mind is. I feel like we draw her like how she is on the inside. She's like really creepy on the outside, and it's representing what she got going inside, you know what I mean? Which is really creepy and really gross. Cassandra Nova doesn't often think twice when it comes to pulling off unspeakable acts of horror. She will turn you inside out if she feels she needs to, or simply just if she wants to. And honestly, she can do that. At least from a psionic standpoint, and maybe even from a physical standpoint too. There's a few things that have happened, not quite sure what happened with her, but I was creepy and I don't want it to happen to me, I'll tell you that much. Cassandra Nova is one of the most powerful telepaths and psionic characters we have in Marvel Comics, and she just so happens to be a villain, usually, who until recently didn't even possess a sense of empathy. So, this has led her to slaughter millions without even batting an eye. In fact, she's probably less likely to blink and more likely to stare intently while she does this, as she laughs maniacally afterward. Number 4, Galactus. Have you seen Galactus? I don't think I need to justify why he's so scary. So instead, I'm just gonna talk a bit about the time that he took on Dazzler as one of his heralds. This was also a pretty scary time for me as a reader, because during that whole issue, during that whole story, I was wondering if Dazzler would ever get to go back home to Earth to continue to pursue her career as a singer. Seriously, when Dazzler goes on these wacky adventures in the comics, I'm always left worrying about if she's missing singing gigs back home. Like, I'm like, is there a concert going on right now? Like, will she ever recover her career? No, but in all seriousness, Galactus is scary not just because he is gigantic, though honestly there is also that pretty terrifying, especially scary for those who have megalophobia, a fear of gigantic things. He's also scary because in many ways he is inevitable. Although I believe Galactus is still currently deceased in the comics, it has been implied and stated on multiple occasions in the past that his existence is necessary for the cosmos to be in balance and continue on forward, implying that even when he's gone, we have to deal with the fear of what might happen to the universe and even perhaps the multiverse in his absence, which is now. Number 3, Tarn the Uncaring. Just thinking about Tarn sends shivers down my spine. Tarn is or was one of the Iraqi mutants. He was kinda like the Araco version of Krakoa's Mr. Sinister, except that Tarn is an Omega level mutant who also has magic-based powers as well. Tarn's powers are mainly psionic in nature, granting him the ability to read minds while also causing immense pain to his target. Not only is he telepathic, but he's also an immensely powerful telekinetic as well. Like Mr. Sinister, he is obsessed with evolution and genes, and is capable of altering the genetic makeup of other mutants, even taking their powers away or simply malforming them to the point that they can no longer function. The Locust Vile are what Tarn calls his loyal servants, who see him basically as a god. These Iraqi mutants are Tarn's experiments. While most don't survive his experimentation process, the ones who do worship him as their god and join his Locust Vile. Tarn also has the ability to teleport too, so he could just like pop up beside you and then literally turn you into a pile of painful goo. Pretty scary stuff. Number 2, Knull. Knull is basically the biggest, baddest symbiote around. Yeah, you thought Venom was scary? You thought Carnage was scary? Well, I mean, you're right. Both of those symbiotic characters are pretty scary. But without Knull, neither would even exist, so think about that. Knull is the god of symbiotes and also wields a symbiotic army complete with symbiotic dragons as well. I mean, yeah. Number 1, the many-angled ones, aka way, Marvel's version of the Elder Gods. Or at least one of their versions, I would say. What could be scarier in any reality, honestly? Yep, Marvel also has their own Elder Gods who have been known sometimes as the Many-Angled Ones. What do the Many-Angled Ones get up to? Well, when they invade the reality known as Earth 10011, they warp it into something horrifically twisted. After they have influenced and invaded this reality successfully, death is eliminated and life runs rampant and unchecked, with many prominent figures in this reality pledging themselves to the Many-Angled Ones. And if you think that eliminating death would be a good thing, just check out this universe. We'd come to know this reality as the Cancerverse. For a while, the Many-Angled Ones and the Cancerverse actually threatened the entire multiverse, attempting at first to invade Earth 616, which is our main comic book continuity. Fortunately, they did not succeed in their attempt, but if they had, that should be like a what if issue. What if they did that? Does that exist? If it exists, let me know what issue it is so I can look it up and read it.
At number 10 is the obvious Venom. Born from the unholy union of an alien symbiote and the embittered reporter Eddie Brock, this malevolent force emerged as an embodiment of Peter Parker's absolute worst fears. In the comics, Venom's sinister plot unfurled in the shadowy corners of New York City as he relentlessly pursued a vendetta against our friendly neighborhood hero. Armed with intimate knowledge of Peter's life, Venom's malevolence reached chilling heights. He would haunt Aunt May's doorstep, casting an eerie shadow over her once safe haven, and sent shivers down Mary Jane's spine in the very home she shared with the web-slinger. Now, while Venom recently has undergone a reluctant transformation into an anti-hero, his origins continue to haunt Spider-Man's psyche, proving even that in the world of comics, nightmares can endure. At number 9 is Morbius the Living Vampire. Introduced in 1971 with the Amazing Spider-Man 101, Morbius is no ordinary vampire. He's a scientist turned blood-sucking bad boy due to a failed experiment which aimed to extend his life by curing his rare red bodily fluid disease. This tragic transformation adds depth to his character, making him both terrifying and sympathetic. And fun fact, Morbius actually appears during that same story arc that had Spider-Man grow 2 extra pairs of arms. Yup, the 6-arm saga, which is terrifying in itself, saw Spider-Man accidentally give himself extra limbs after trying to get rid of his powers, because that flows logically, but he only managed to cure himself thanks to an enzyme in the vampire. Anyways, Morbius's blend of science and horror taps into our fear of losing control over our humanity. Battles with Spider-Man challenge not just the hero's physical abilities, but also his moral compass. This complex antagonist pushes us to ponder the boundaries of good and evil. And if you're enjoying this video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 8 is the Demogoblin. One can't help but shudder at the sinister transformation of the Hobgoblin into the Demogoblin. I mean, the Hobgoblin was already scary enough, just jeez. This haunting tale unfolds when the Hobgoblin, desperate for the power to vanquish the Wallcrawler once and for all, entertains a diabolical bargain with Nazareth, a demon of malevolent stature. But rather than directly claiming his soul, Nazareth opts for an unholy possession, forever intertwining the Hobgoblin with this demonic entity. Within the Hobgoblin's shell, an otherworldly struggle ensues, leading to the expulsion of the infernal force. Yet, instead of retreating to the abyss, the vanquished demon materializes as this ghastly Demogoblin. Driven by an inexplicable yearning for redemption, the Demogoblin embarks on a ghastly crusade targeting sinners of all kinds, from ruthless unalivers to mere fibbers, as it seeks to carve its way back to the celestial realm. This spine-tingling saga showcases the chilling depths Marvel Comics can plunge into in pursuit of the scariest Spider-Man villains. And speaking of which, at number 7 is Sin-Eater. In the Marvel Comics universe, not all villains are flashy, superpowered beings. Meet Stanley Carter, for instance, a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent turned NYPD officer who snapped after his partner's demise, who perished in the line of duty, and Stanley Carter became the chilling serial unaliver known as the Sin-Eater, who vowed to take out those he felt were sinners. His victims included a police captain, a judge, and even a priest, with Spider-Man nearly crossing his own moral line in the process. as. Now what sets Sin-Eater apart is his lack of interest in being a traditional supervillain. He's a remorseless vigilante driven solely by a dark sense of justice, making him one of Spider-Man's most disturbing adversaries. At number 6 is the Lizard. Enter Dr. Kurt Connors, a brilliant army surgeon who paid a steep price for his dedication to saving lives. After losing his arm in the crucible of battle, Connors embarked on a desperate quest to regrow his missing limb. And his solution? A serum rooted in the DNA of reptiles, a decision that would forever change his destiny. The consequences were chilling. The serum transformed Connors into the grotesque Lizard, a hulking reptilian menace devoid of self-control. With his psyche imprisoned, Dr. Connors became a nightmarish force of nature, leaving destruction in his wake. Though Spider-Man made an antidote to quell his reptilian rampage, the specter of the Lizard continues to haunt Dr. Connors, persisting as one of Spider-Man's most poignant and terrifying foes. At number 5 is Vermin. Edward Whalen, a genius geneticist who endured a harrowing upbringing under the cruel hand of his father, but ultimately Edward's brilliance would serve as the catalyst for his descent into the abyss of villainy. It was a sinister alliance with Baron Zemo and Primus that sealed his gruesome fate. Subjected to a diabolical experiment, Edward emerged as the grotesque Vermin, a rat-like abomination with the insatiable appetite for human flesh. Now, Vermin lurks in the murky depths of Manhattan's sewers, a denizen of the city's darkest underbelly. His once brilliant mind has been cruelly eroded, unable to even remember the life he once had. At number 4 is the Swarm. In the web of Marvel's rogues gallery, there exists a truly spine-tingling villain born from the annals of macabre imagination. Fritz von Meyer, an evil scientist with sinister ambitions, sought refuge in the depths of South America following the tumultuous end of World War II, and we can all guess which side he was on. His post-war existence, however, took a bizarre twist when he donned the mantle of a humble beekeeper, but fate had a malevolent design in store for Fritz. Beneath the tropical canopy, he stumbled upon a colony of bees, oddly mutated by some sinister force. In a grisly turn of events, Fritz's quest to subdue the colony led to his untimely demise as he was devoured alive by the very creatures he sought to control. All that remained in the end were his skeletal remains, yet his tale doesn't end there. In a truly nightmarish turn, the bees actually absorbed Fritz's consciousness, merging his with the swarming hive mind of their own, and the result was an abomination known as Swarm, a being composed of thousands of bees acting in macabre unison, each dancing to the nightmarish symphony of Fritz's malevolent will. At number 3, the Thousand. In the comics, few Spider-Man villains are as unsettling as Carl King, who actually started off as one of Peter's high school bullies alongside Flash. Now, he was one of the few who actually witnessed Peter Parker's spider bite, and then was the only one who witnessed Peter's newfound powers thereafter. And so he sought similar powers and actually went on to eat the radioactive spider that bit Peter in the first place. Kind of a weird way of doing it. And so instead of acquiring new abilities, he transformed into the Thousand, a nightmarish collective of cyclically linked spiders. These spiders infiltrate and control victims by consuming them from the inside. Carl's mother was the first victim, but many followed thereafter. The Thousand is a chilling reminder that in the Spider-Man universe, true terror often arises from unexpected sources, making them the most spine-tingling foes in the web-slingers rogues gallery. At number 2 is Carnage, also known as Cletus Cassidy, a name that chills the spine, because he's a man whose descent into darkness was inevitable. Born without superpowers, he wielded the horrific potential within his twisted soul. See, it all began when he was just a child, committing his first heinous act by sending his grandmother tumbling down a staircase. Just a glimpse into the malevolence that lay dormant beneath this character's psyche. The St. Estes Home for Boys, an ill-fated refuge, failed to contain his rage. The disciplinarian administration met their grim end at his hands, and a poor girl met her doom beneath the wheels of a bus, and thereafter he left the orphanage reduced to smoldering ruins. Cassidy's score count probably spiraled into the dozens by this point, but his malevolence met its match when he found himself behind the bars of Rikers Island, sharing a cell with none other than Eddie Brock. Venom's chaotic escape left an indelible mark as a fragment of the symbiote left behind by Venom had merged with Cassidy, birthing none other than the monstrous Carnage. From then on, the nightmare had only begun, unleashing a new terror upon an unsuspecting world. And at number 1 is Green Goblin. In the annals of Marvel Comics, few villains send shivers down the spine quite like Norman Osborn, unwitting creator of the maniacal Green Goblin. A quest for strength and intellect led to a catastrophic incident, granting Osborn great power but also shattering his sanity. As the Green Goblin, Osborn became not just Spider-Man's nemesis, but a threat to the entire Marvel universe. His reign of terror left a grim trail of casualties, none more tragic than the unaliving of Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker's main love interest, which was a cold-hearted act just to torment Spider-Man. The Green Goblin's unpredictability, cunning, and ruthlessness make him one of Marvel's most enduring and fearsome foes, a chilling reminder of the darkness lurking in Spider-Man's world. Remember, fear is subjective, and what might terrify one person might not terrify another, but in the world of Spider-Man, these villains have left an indelible mark on the wall-crawler's psyche.
And at number 10, Holocaust. I mean, his name enough should have you wary. Holocaust first appeared in 1995's X-Men Alpha, and is one of the Horsemen of Apocalypse. Holocaust was initially from the Age of Apocalypse timeline, where he was known as Nemesis, where he was said to be one of Apocalypse's children. Magneto would strip Nemesis of his flesh in a battle, enraged for the deaths that Nemesis had caused. His body was then retrieved by Apocalypse, who gave him to Dark Beast, who managed to capture his spiritual essence and put it inside a near-indestructible crystalline exo-armor, a procedure in which Nemesis became Holocaust, or rather, Holocaust was born. This character is particularly terrifying for one specific reason: his abilities. He initially possessed the power to generate highly destructive bionuclear microwave energy blasts, which can be super destructive. And later on, when he became an energy being, he gained the ability to drain the life force from other beings in order to charge his own exoskeleton that acted as a suit of armor for him. He's pretty much physically invulnerable, or at least he was. The character was killed by Hyperion, who cracked open Holocaust's exoskeleton and then absorbed all of his bioenergy into himself by literally inhaling him. So that's a fun way to go. And at number 9, Krakoa. Krakoa is one of the X-Men's earliest villains, having appeared in Giant Size X-Men issue 1 in 1975. There's been 2 versions of Krakoa over the years, with the first being the villainous one. It appeared initially as a small island in the Pacific Ocean that was located near a nuclear bombing test site. The radiation from that test site mutated the island's ecosystem, which altered the island into a hive mind entity in 1945, something that Nick Fury and his Howling Commandos witnessed. They encountered much of the island's intelligence and established a peaceful treaty in exchange for keeping the island's existence a complete secret. Now flash forward to 1975. Krakoa decides it's hungry and it wants to feed on the life force of mutants, because I guess mutants are tastier than humans. It kills a young mutant team and later captures the original iteration of X-Men. This is what causes Professor Xavier to create the second wave of X-Men, the team that consists of Wolverine, Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler, Thunderbird, Sunfire, and Banshee, all to save the first iteration. Polaris eventually launches Krakoa into outer space, and later it becomes captured by the Stranger. Now this Krakoa is perhaps one of the most physically intimidating entities that the mutant team has ever fought. It is a literal monstrous island. The second version of it though, in case you're wondering, is much more benevolent, having been grown by a member of the Hellfire Club but wanting to redeem itself with the X-Men and become one of them. It ends up becoming a part of the school and even helps the X-Men financially by growing diamonds on a tree that it produces. Man, imagine having a friend who could grow diamonds on trees for you. It's the dream. And at number 8, Sauron. Don't be confused by its name. This is no Middle-earth Sauron, luckily. Sauron of the Marvel Universe is quite different, despite being evil and having taken the name Sauron after the Lord of the Rings villain. Sauron is the alter ego of Carl Lycos, who has a Jekyll and Hyde relationship of sorts with this humanoid pterodactyl form of his. He's essentially an energy vampire who often lives within the prehistoric jungle known as the Savage Land. First appearing in this form in X-Men issue 60 back in 1969, Sauron was initially meant to be a giant bat-like creature, but back in those times, the comics code authority was still in effect, somewhat. And his creators, Roy Thomas and Neil Adams, inquired with the organization, who suggested that the character's vampiric traits would be in violation of the code. So instead of going with something that resembled a giant vampire bat, which was banned according to the code, they ended up opting out for a form that looked more like a pterodactyl. Anywho, what can Sauron do aside from look absolutely terrifying? Well, he's got all the superhuman fixings: strength, speed, stamina, durability, and intelligence. He flies, duh, has hypnotic eyes, fire breath, razor-sharp claws, and most importantly, he can absorb life forces and mutant powers, and can sense mutants too. In addition to this, he can gain the powers of other mutants. Once, while battling against the Avengers and the X-Men, he was shot in the head by the second Black Widow, but survived thanks to having absorbed Wolverine's healing factor. And at 7, the Wendigo. The Wendigo is most well known in Marvel Comics for being the first foe of Wolverine's, the enemy in which Wolverine and the Hulk take on together. Based on the Wendigo legend of the Algonquin people, it's a large, beastly creature with superhuman strength, stamina, durability, and agility. It has enhanced speed, hardened and sharp talons, and a regenerative healing factor. It's found in the woods of northern Canada and is the result of a curse that takes place under very specific conditions, primarily when a human in the forests feed on human flesh. Any of you familiar with the recent video game title Until Dawn may be familiar with the legends, although the Wendigo of Marvel Comics looks quite different than the video game's representation. Now, over the years, the Wendigo has taken on its fair share of mutants, including Wolverine, Nightcrawler, and the members of Alpha Flight. And the Wendigo isn't just one character either. Various different Wendigo have appeared over the years, all formerly humans who partook in cannibalism and have become these wretched creatures. And at 6, Predator X. Predator X first hit the panels of Marvel Comics back in 2007 in New X-Men issue 34. It is a grotesque beast, reptile-like, with superhuman strength and speed, sharp claws and teeth, toxic saliva, accelerated hearing, and its body is covered in non-toxic inorganic mercury. That latter bit means it is highly resistant to physical damage and can draw materials in the environment surrounding it to help reform itself. So why is it scary? If you aren't already kind of freaked out by it? Well, it can track mutants on their genetic signature and is pretty much tireless, meaning it can track its prey relentlessly until it succeeds, wearing down its target for as long as necessary. It can run at speeds of 199 kilometers an hour for a total of 19 hours straight before having to slow down. Luckily, its insides are not as durable as its outsides. Wolverine managed to kill it by tearing it apart from the inside out with his claws. But fun fact, it killed one of the villains that we mentioned on our part 1 list, Peeper, who it devoured on the side of a road. It's vicious to say the least. Predator X was created thanks to Stryker, who, prior to dying, requested that a living weapon be made in order to combat the coming of a mutant Antichrist, aka Hope Summers. Moving on to number 5, Sugar Man. Sugar Man is by no means a good X-Men villain, but he is definitely a terrifying one to take in. First debuting in the Age of Apocalypse timeline, Earth 295, in Generation Next issue 2 in 1995, Sugar Man would manage to sneak his way out of that reality and onto Earth 616, when bombs are blowing the crap out of 295 as a last resort means to be rid of Apocalypse. Sugar Man, aside from being hideous and offensive to the eyes, is an expert biologist and geneticist. He has 4 arms, superhuman strength, razor-sharp teeth and claws, an indefinitely long bioelectric tongue, ew, an enhanced sense of smell, and has the ability to alter his body mass and size, which is actually how he sneaked his way over to 616, by hiding in Colossus's boot of all places. He's responsible for a handful of deaths on Earth 295, and when he arrives on 616, he ends up forcibly enslaving hundreds of mutants for the magistrates. Not the reason why he really ends up on this list. Just look at him. From scary looks to scary intentions, moving on to number 4, we have the Reavers. The Reavers are a team of criminal cyborgs who first debuted in Uncanny X-Men issue 229 back in May of 1988, created by Chris Claremont and Mark Silvestri. The Reavers, led by a man named Donald Pierce, are dedicated to the destruction of mutants, and specifically the destruction of Wolverine. Initially, they were a gang of looters who operated in Australia, but began to branch out when they used the mutant gateway to teleport across the globe in order to pull off more sophisticated robberies. The X-Men stopped them, with only a handful of the Reavers escaping that first encounter, later reassembling under Pierce, who takes the team into a more militarized direction, using them as an assassination squadron of sorts bent on taking vengeance on the X-Men. They've done some pretty messed up stuff over the years, including capturing Wolverine, torturing him, and crucifying him. They're an extremist team bent on eliminating mutant kind, humans who have become cyborgs as part of the cause. And they've even stirred up trouble in alternate timelines too. In Age of Apocalypse, they were a band of human traitors who served the titular villain, and in the Ultimate Marvel Universe, they are human gladiators who have undergone surgery to become cyborgs, all for the purpose of hunting down mutants on live television. That's messed up. I mean, imagine running into a team of extremists like that who embrace technology in order to wipe out a race. Yeah, they're scary because they're a foe of the X-Men who are a little bit more realistic antagonists compared to some of their other enemies. We also got to see the Reavers make a cinematic debut in Logan, and needless to say, they're pretty darn scary in their live-action adaptation as well. And at 3, the Purifiers. The Purifiers are one step up from the Reavers, and are unsettling for very similar reasons. They're a paramilitary and terrorist organization, also created by Chris Claremont, that debuted in Marvel graphic novel issue 5, X-Men God Loves, Man Kills. And and they are led by none other than Reverend William Stryker, who is their founder. So their whole shtick is that they're Christian fundamentalists who believe that they are fighting a holy war against mutants. They see mutants as the children of the devil and therefore need to be exterminated. In their first appearance, they abducted Charles Xavier and several members of the X-Men team, killed mutant children, fought against Magneto, and almost executed Kitty Pryde. Luckily for her, one of Stryker's guards grew horrified with his actions and shot Stryker, resulting in Kitty getting away and Stryker being sent to prison. That wasn't the last of them though. Even after Stryker no longer led the group, other successors took over the leadership mantle, including his own son Jason Stryker. Later on, the Purifiers got their hands on Warren Worthington III's wings and used blood from them, extracted Apocalypse's techno-organic strain inside of them in order to graft it and then give to the Purifiers, giving them their own wings, a specific subgroup that would be called the Choir, whose whole MO was to, I quote, strike down Satan's spawn with God's own might. Archangel would later massacre all of the Choir minus 3 members. And at number 2, Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister is one of the most notorious X-Men villains. Sinister, aka Nathaniel Essex, first debuted as the employer of the assassin group the Marauders, mentioned in the Uncanny X-Men issue 212 in 1986, but first seen in the Uncanny X-Men issue 221, almost a whole year later. Not only is his aesthetic unsettling, but he's also capable of some really terrifying stuff. He's telepathic, telekinetic, has superhuman strength, durability, and longevity, can create concussive energy projections, and, potentially scariest of all, can manipulate his body on a molecular level. Born in 1859, he was obsessed with Darwin's theories and was considered an unorthodox biologist, conducting immoral experiments that would make him an outcast amongst his peers. He even dug up his dead firstborn child to experiment on it. After awakening Apocalypse, the villain would painfully transform him into an ageless being, with Essex taking on the name Sinister, which was the last thing that his wife called him on her deathbed. It's a wee bit masochistic, isn't it? And finally, in our number 1 spot, the Phoenix Force. One of the most terrifying foes that the X-Men have ever faced off against is the Phoenix Force, an entity that is an immortal and immutable manifestation of the universal force of life and passion, born of the void between states of being, the nexus of all psionic energy which does, has, and ever will exist within the Marvel multiverse. The Phoenix Force requires a host, and it manifested within Jean Grey, who, when losing control of it, became the Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix has a vast amount of abilities, is able to manipulate matter, energy, and life force, and has cosmic awareness, all of which makes Jean's Dark Phoenix incredibly powerful and threatening. In many cases, in alternate realities, Jean has completely wiped out the planet or consumed the universe when not stopped by the X-Men. And while much of the Phoenix saga has been retconned, along with Jean dying and coming back to life, and then dying and coming back to life again, the Phoenix Force has still proven to be rather deadly regardless. Over the years in the comics, the Phoenix Force has proven capable of taking on powerful foes like the Beyonder, absorbing stars for energy that creates supernovas capable of wiping out entire planets, and even flat out wiping out all of existence in What If issue 27 volume 1. I don't know about you guys, but to me that's scary as hell.
Number 10. Legion. Legion, aka David Haller, is the son of Charles Xavier and Gabriel Haller. He first debuted back in 1985 in New Mutants number 25. He is an extremely powerful mutant. Legion has a whole host of abilities, too many to name almost. Chief amongst them, telepathy, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, reality warping, and so much more. The only thing, David's not really fully in control of his powers. And a mega level mutant, when his powers first manifested, it was during a terrorist situation, and he actually ended up absorbing the mind of the lead terrorist, Jamail Tarami, which led to his mind splintering and him developing multiple personalities, each of whom controlled a different aspect of his powers. Legion started off as a villain of the X-Men, as he was quickly possessed by the Shadow King, as he was rendered catatonic shortly after his first true manifestation of power. David is also responsible for the Age of Apocalypse timeline, when he went back in time attempting to kill Magneto but killed his father instead, creating that horrifying branch of reality. Part of what made Legion so dangerous was his insanity and unpredictability as a result. However, over the years, David has metamorphosized into somewhat of a hero and has gained more control over his powers, partially through training and partially through tech. However, with a character like Legion, there's always the potential that his grip on his personalities could slip, and he could find himself a menace to the X-Men and the world once more. Also, watch Legion on FX, it's great. Number 9. Danger. Danger is the manifestation and personification of the Danger Room. Now, even if one is only casually acquainted with the X-Men, they most likely know of the Danger Room, the training space that pits the X-Men against all kinds of, well, dangerous obstacles to hone their skills. However, what they may not be aware of is this plot. Due to lots of backstory, Xavier found himself updating the Danger Room with Shi'ar tech. However, as he did, it posed him a question. where am I? This led Charles to realize the room was sentient. However, he also needed a space for the X-Men to train, so he decided the best thing to do was cover it up and tell no one. The Danger Room was then utilized and destroyed when the mansion was attacked, the various times that's happened. And after one such time, Danger began to seize control of the other machines in an attempt to escape and forge a body. First, Danger coaxed a student to suicide, then managed to build a female body, take on and defeat the X-Men in her quest to kill her father, Xavier. Danger spent years seeking revenge, building new bodies or possessing others, like the Omega Sentinel. She was made all the more dangerous by her intimate knowledge of the team's weaknesses and fighting styles. However, ultimately this character became an ally to the X-Men. Sometimes you just gotta get over all that dark stuff Xavier does when writers want to introduce conflict into the story. That's how it goes. No matter how scary you are, turn good, you get bumped down the list. Number 8. Arcade. Arcade first appeared in Marvel Team-Up Volume 1, number 65 back in 1978. Now Arcade has no powers, but you don't need them to be a scary or a credible threat. Arcade has a genius-level intellect and a penchant for murder that has led him down the path to be a hitman, but he doesn't just kill people. No, he makes them work their way through elaborate arenas of his own design, in his amusement park-inspired murder world. Arcade never seems to have a hard time kidnapping people either. You're living your life one minute, next, boom, you're in murder world. While Arcade has gone up against many Marvel heroes, he has had many notable encounters with the X-Men. When possible, he likes to get people in pairs to make more interesting, like Gambit and Wolverine. The rooms will be designed with a myriad of traps and dangers to test the specific occupant's skill set and mental fortitude. Now, some may be like, scary, but you may change your tune if you woke up kidnapped in Murder World. Number 7. David Moreau. David Moreau is yet another normal human, but is on here for the effect he has had on the X-Men verse. Moreau is also known by the name the G-Engineer. He first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 236 back in 1988, and was allied with the island of Genosha, a land whose prosperity had been built on the backs of mutant slavery, which had been made possible thanks to Moreau's invention of a mind control device. He also invented the mutate process, wherein 13-year-olds were tested for the X gene, and if it was found, they were turned into mutates, with their memories erased and rendered completely obedient. Now, Moreau can't get all the villain cred here. His mission was helped along by tech given to him by a villain who was in part 2, the Sugar Man. The Sugar Man had obtained a version of this tech from his reality, that being the Age of Apocalypse, and that version of Mr. Sinister. Still horrifying stuff, and a threat to not just the X-Men, but mutants everywhere. Number 6. Nimrod. Don't let the name fool you. Nimrod is a force to be reckoned with. First appearing in 1985 in Uncanny X-Men number 191. Nimrod comes from the now famous Days of Future Past storyline, a descendant of the robotic hunting machines, the Sentinels. His name is actually a biblical one that means mighty hunter. The fact that it translates to a playground insult years later, that's not his fault. Nimrod was created by the Sentinels to be the ultimate mutant hunting weapon, and he is nigh invulnerable. After some time travel, he decides that he doesn't need to eliminate all mutants, just the X-Men, powerful ones who are outlaws, who have an impact on the timeline. It's very Terminator-esque, and that's terrifying. That scene in the first Terminator where it's coming down the hall towards them dragging its foot and it seems slow, but then it pans out and you see how fast it's really moving, that still messes me up. The scene and the sound of it dragging its foot, just the... Number 5. Archangel. Warren Worthington III gets to be so high up because of just what an impact his villainous turn made on X-Men history, and it's a great storyline. Warren was one of the original X-Men, a founding member from all the way back in X-Men number 1 in 1963. Warren always had a complicated relationship with his mutation, the wings of an angel, or at least it seems that way now. At first he was a stereotypical air character, then he got broody when things got angsty in the 80s. Warren's descent towards villainy began with X-Factor, a group Warren was backing, which ends up getting viewed as mutant hunters for hire, and after he is exposed as the backer, his wings are mutilated and develop gangrene, leading to them needing to be amputated. Warren is devastated and commandeers a jet that has been sabotaged to blow up. He doesn't know that. Before it does, he is transported away by Apocalypse, who offers him a spot as a horseman. Apocalypse performs extensive genetic alterations that change Warren's appearance and give him metallic wings, and for a time, he was the horseman Death. Manipulated by Apocalypse, he turns harshly on his friends. As Archangel, he was a force to be reckoned with, and his path towards redemption and occasional slips back make for good reading. The design is great, those sharp metallic wings, and again, he's someone who knows the team's weaknesses. He is good currently, which, well, bleh. Give me back my Archangel. Number 4, Mastermind. We're talking about the first villain to have that name, who was instrumental in the Phoenix arc. This character first debuted in 1964 in X-Men number 4, and for our purposes, we need Jason Wyngarde. Mastermind has the power to cast illusions, vivid and realistic ones, that he uses to manipulate people to his whims. He can also alter people's senses, how they feel, what they see, and most importantly, how they perceive him. He likes to up his handsomeness game. What makes him so formidable is that he can even affect powerful telepaths, such as Xavier and most notably Jean Grey. This occurred during his association with the Hellfire Club. He at first uses his powers to pose as Nikos and initiate a romance with the help of Emma Frost. He is then able to convince Jean that it was Victorian times and they were married, and that she was the Black Queen. Mastermind doesn't make it, but his legacy lives on, as does his creepy mind manipulation plot. Scary, to be made to think you live in a bodice ripper. Mental manipulation is scary stuff. Number 3, Strife. Okay, so some explanations, but the Cliff Notes version. Strife is a clone of Cable, who first appeared in 1990 in New Mutants number 86. Strife was raised by Apocalypse, in the future, for the purposes of being a host body. However, Apocalypse decides against it once he realizes that Strife is a clone, as he thought he had the real Cable. But he was wrong. Strife's contribution to this list is the Legacy virus, which was first Legacy 1, then Legacy 2, but would eventually mutate into Legacy 3. The virus was set to target mutants when their X gene was activated, which would ultimately cause the body to stop being able to produce healthy cells and lead to death. But before the end, the victim's powers would go haywire, causing much damage to those around them. Strife took his time perfecting this virus, that's why there's multiple versions, except for 3, which was a mutated version that could infect everybody. Number 2, Cassandra Nova. This is a more recent character appearing in 2001 during the new X-Men number 21, as an antagonist to the X-Men and Charles Xavier specifically. So bear with me, because it's gonna get a little zany. Cassandra Nova is Charles Xavier's twin, sorta. But she was conceived without a body, and copied one from Charles in the womb. However, Charles sensed her terrifying thoughts, again in the womb, so he strangled her, and she was stillborn, but her essence survived. Eventually, she was able to build an all-new body. She is Charles's opposite, a dark mirror. Her first act to announce herself to the X-Men was to kill 16 million mutants on Genosha in a mass mutant genocide. As a Mumadrai, Nova was meant to have to wrestle with Charles for control of his body, but thanks to his mutant abilities and hence hers, she could build her own. She has psychic powers compared to Charles, plus telekinesis, phasing ability, the ability to create psionic armor and block attacks, and a hate-on for the X-Men. It's just a lot. And number 1. You guys have been waiting for it. You're excited. It's Proteus. Proteus debuted in 1979 in Uncanny X-Men number 125. Proteus was meant to be one of the strongest mutants ever conceived. Born as Kevin McTaggart, he is the son of longtime X-Men ally Moira McTaggart. However, Kevin's powers are so intense they cause him to crave energy to replace what he has expended. In fact, he's actually made of pure energy. His mother had to keep him in containment to protect him and others, but he eventually escaped and put his powers to use, which includes body possession, so he can hop from host to host. He also has psionic energy composition and reality warping abilities that he can actually control. Before he was known as Proteus, he was known simply as Mutant X. So because of the fact that he exists in a pure energy state, the bodies that he hops into, he uses them up pretty quickly, and Proteus normally just burns them out. He could leave before he kills them, but he just doesn't. He also has access to all their memories even after he's left, and has hopped into some of the X-Men's bodies. He's been known to melt buildings, reverse gravity, stretch people into liquid, and more. Basically whatever he can imagine, he can do. He eventually became able to possess multiple individuals at the same time and travel interdimensionally. He's even attempted to bring the astral plane into normal reality. His powers are out of control. The fact that they defeat him at all is a minor miracle each time. Proteus is terrifying in the scope of his power and the fact that really you can't get rid of him. So those were some more scary X-Men villains. I don't know how they sleep at night. I wouldn't be able to. So many baddies. Especially Arcade. Just going to sleep one place and waking up somewhere you didn't fall asleep skeezes me out.